when advertisements by nonprofit organizations like this one, this was out of the Electrosensitivity UK, they tried to raise awareness with posters. It says, "How safe is 5G?" It quotes Dr. Martin Paul. It quotes the EMF scientist appeal. It quotes the European Union, the 5G appeal to the European Union, also signed by many scientists. And it was banned. One of many posters that nonprofit health associations have tried to raise awareness in the community, put up around town in their areas. And of course, complaints are made and those posters are banned. This was banned in the United Kingdom. Real quick look at what is safe. So the regulations we have now for cell phone radiation are big. If you know anything, I hope you know, because if you don't know this fact, it's hard when you're reading the science. And I think everyone will be reading more about this. So know this fact. Heating is the only harm according to the Federal Communications Commission and most governments around the world. The assumption is that wireless radio frequency radiation, which is microwaves, only can hurt us if it heats us, kind of like meat is cooked. This was based on research done in the 70s and 80s on small animals, where animals had a rectal thermometer and they increased the microwave radiation on them. And when they changed their behavior, they stopped pressing a pedal for food. That's when the scientists, many of the military scientists said, okay, that's the level of harm. Heating is the only harm. And I have this piece of meat because the other crazy thing about our limits is that they average the heating. So not only do they only measure heat, but they average it. Now, if you have a piece of meat and you have it on a fire, and one side is getting burnt and the other side is relatively raw, you could average the cooking of the whole thing and say, well, this meat is not burnt because I averaged the heat. But that is actually how we test cell phones. We average the heat. So even if there's an intense level in one part of the tissue, in one area, if it's less a little bit later, and it gets a little complex as to how they do it, but I want to show you an image of this. They say the number based on averaging. Can you imagine averaging? So even in regards to heating, they're doing it wrong. But heating is not the only harm, but yet that is what we base our limits on. This is an image showing how we test cell phones for radiation. And they take this thermometer, they put it in this plastic head filled with liquid, and they take the thermometer and they put it around and look at different sections, and they take the temperature. There we have the phone. There is an ear that has a spacer. It serves as a spacer. Here's how they test for other devices. They might put the phone underneath. This is the body phantom, except our brains are not made of sugar liquid. We have developing brains with different tissues in them. Research has shown that stem cells, which are more active in children, are more activated, more affected by wireless modulated radio frequency radiation. I have here a logo, We Are Not SAM. I wanted to talk about that for a minute because We Are Not SAM is a new campaign out of folks in Australia calling to boycott 5G cell phones. And what they say is, hey, we are not SAM. Oh, I forgot to mention, going back to this, SAM stands for the Standard Anthropomorphic Mannequin. And this adult head is what is used to test cell phones. It's called SAM. The United States has no federally developed safety standards for wireless radiation. In the 1990s, the Environmental Protection Agency was actively looking to set safety guidelines, safety limits, and they were fully defunded. What I'm showing you here is actually slides from a FOIA investigation, not by myself, but they show that the EPA was presenting on these safety limits. We have documents showing where they say, we're working on it, we're going to have these limits, it's really important. We'll have exposure guidelines for heating and also for non-heating modulation effects. but they were defunded, and the United States government adopted limits based on industry-funded groups. Those limits were set in 1996. Excuse me. Here is an image, and actually this is ended in 2013, so there's a lot more science now. But this is the year when current FCC limits were developed, and this shows how many publications on non-ionizing electromagnetic fields were in the published literature on PubMed. And as you can see, there's many studies past then, and yet there's been no action. There's been no change to our limits. Please do look at the work of Dr. Henry Lai and go to Microwave News as well, where there is documentation, also the Bioinitiative as well, that Dr. Lai has published, put forward research, evaluating the research. So when you have industry studies, they more often don't show an effect. When you have non-industry studies that are funded independently, they more often do find an adverse effect. Here's an example of an image sent to us by a woman with a tumor, and she tells her story. We post, whenever people write us with their stories, we put it online, and she is sending out a warning note not to put the cell phone to the head. And yet so many people do this with the phone, which is radiating not only your brain, but your thyroid, your neck, and of course the babies. And this was me. I used a cell phone. I put the cell phone in the baby wrap. That's what I did. No one told me. Here's a pictures from Diagnosis Funk, which is a nonprofit group out of Germany. The Doctors Working Group on Digital Media just recently, this was this week, had a campaign with a protest. They had a large banner and signs in front of the Ministry of Social Affairs, and they handed over an open letter on the subject of mobile phones and safety for kids. The doctors demanded that smartphones not be in the hands of children. They wanted wireless radiation-free hospital rooms and advice for information for people with electrosensitivity. And they had a scroll where they talked about the psychosocial and health consequences of our ever-increasing use of digital media. And they called for a ban on wireless in schools as well.